Hello there, and today I'm with someone who's been slick, a rich kid, and a real romantic. He is, of course, Mr. Midge Ure. Midge, take us back to the early days. Where were you actually brought up?
I was brought up in Cambuslang, which is it's the largest village in Scotland, which is actually just something that's stuck on the edge of Glasgow. It's become part of kind of greater Glasgow, I suppose. It was a classic tenement, you know, those ancient old buildings, kind of 4 or 5 stories high, and we lived on the ground floor. The outstanding thing about it was that it had gas mantles that lit the close. So you got the close and these gas mantles, horrible little things, which lit off this yellow light that kind of sucked any light that was anywhere else out. You know, it got darker when you lit them. And these things were more often than not bust. So you walked up this completely dark close to get to a little flat, which was 1 bedroom and a sitting room, outside toilet. The sitting room had something called a cavity bed, which is like a hole in the wall where my parents used to live with a curtain on it. And that's how it was. But it was great because I didn't know any better. It was everyone else I knew lived in a place like that.
Was it rather tough at school?
It wasn't really, I have to say. I was a bit of a wuss at school. You know, I wasn't interested in sports. I didn't play football. School was fine. It was very Victorian in its standards, I seem to remember. There was a teacher there who looked like a Victorian, you know, the hair pulled back, bun in the back of her head, grey suit, you know, really strict. And the thing I remember was you used to get the strap for nothing at all. You know, if you spoke in class, "Your boy, come here," and they'd take this huge, great big leather strap that wasn't flexible at all. It was like a stick with 3 big fingers on the end, and you'd have to stand in front of the rest of the class and be whacked on not just the hands but right up your arms. You know, these big wheels up your arms. It was heady. I mean, it was so Victorian and, you know, totally outrageous. You know, the sort of thing that just wouldn't be allowed today at all. You'd have them up for abuse as soon as look at them if that happened today.
Somehow I just don't get the impression there's a lot of career masters around at the time pointing you to the world of entertainment there.
No, I don't remember ever meeting a careers officer. My dad was a van driver all his life. He drove a baker's van. And I used to get up at some hideous time in the morning, get himself, you know, washed and shaved every morning, which I never ever do, and then wake us up, get us ready, you know, to go to school. He'd go off to work, or when we were working, you know, they'd get us up and get us to our apprenticeship or whatever. And it was instilled in me at a very early age that what I should have is a skill. You know, I should have some kind of formal training, i.e. engineering. You know, I should be an electrician. I should be you know, do an apprenticeship, get a skill, get a trade at your fingertips. Because then that trade would take you anywhere in the world. You would be able to go and work in Japan or Singapore or Australia or whatever. So you had an option. You know, he never had a skill as such. So it was instilled in me that, you know, leave school at 16. You know, get yourself a trade, and you'll be sorted forever. Of course, it wasn't quite true. You know, the things have changed quite a lot in the last 30 years. But I did. You know, I didn't have a careers officer. I left school at 15 because I went to Rutherglen Academy, which is like a grammar school, which is far too intellectual for me. It was so difficult. I went because my brother went there, and I thought I'd be letting the family down if I didn't go. So I managed to get in there, not because of any particular skills I had. I was rubbish at maths and I was not very good at English, but I had a high IQ, and the IQ got me into this school. And of course, when I got there, they wouldn't teach me music, and I think the most art you could take was something like 8 periods in the week, and that's the only 2 things I was good at, art and music. And I left at 15 and went to a technical college and got myself an apprenticeship and started going down the route that my parents wanted me to go.
But all this time you're listening to music, obviously. What influenced you in those days?
Oh God! Well, the only musical instrument we had at home initially, when I was a really young kid, was a radio. You know, and I remember my mother as a housewife a young housewife, looking after me during the day before I started school. And I can remember all these tunes getting played on, I presume it was the home programme or the light programme, I'm not sure what it was. And I'd hear things like Sleepwalk by Santos and Johnny, this beautiful slide guitar, beautiful melodies. And when that was getting played on the radio, I must have been 2 or 3 years old. But I remember distinctly these tunes, these songs that I shouldn't remember now. So music to me was, you know, imperative. I don't think we ever got a record player until much later, until I was about 10, 9 or 10. And I remember the record player was a huge, big thing because, you know, we all had our own, we were given an album each for Christmas. And this particular Christmas, my brother got the Beatles' Revolver, I think it was, or A Hard Day's Night. And I got I got Andy Williams' Hawaiian Wedding Songs, and I'm not quite sure who the album was for, but it certainly wasn't for me. But I remember the big joy of having your 5 minutes of putting your record on and being able to play a track because it was yours, whether you wanted to hear it or not.
So was there one record that you remember listening to and thinking, all right, that's for me, I fancy all that?
All of it. I remember hearing the Dave Clark 5 for the first time, doing bits and pieces. And it was the sound of it, it was the production. Although I didn't know what production was, it was or Glad All Over It might have been, you know, they all sounded the same. These huge drums, say that you love me, say you love me, and I'm feeling glad all. I remember this bursting out the radio, and it was fantastic. Again, same again for the Beatles or Jerry and the Pacemakers, or any of that stuff that was coming out of the radio back in the early 60s. The Shadows, you know, guitars were just so wonderful. The sound that these guitars made, this wonderful, haunting, atmospheric sound, these wonderful melodies that the Shadows played, all of that stuff, I just lapped it all up.
Of course, some people actually stumble into show business, but that was actually the name of your first band, wasn't it?
It was, and it was named after a track called The Stumble. I was starting to kind of grow up at this point. I wanted to be a guitarist rather than a singer. I could always sing. I remember doing I used to have a paper round, and of course I'd walk about, and of course where I was doing the paper round was a kind of cul-de-sac, and you'd get this fantastic echo. And I'm walking around singing at the top of my voice, which must have been a right pain in the backside for everybody else who was still sleeping at the time. So yeah, I always sang, but the Stumble thing came from it was a John Mayall's Blues Breakers tune, and I think it was when Eric Clapton was in the band. So I was an aspiring guitar player at this point, and I was listening to all of this, the early British blues boom, and John Mayall's albums were always there. So the Stumble was we proudly called ourselves that, although we couldn't play it.
And from Stumble, the next incarnation was Salvation. Tell us about them.
Well, it was a little bit later than 70, I think. Salvation were a well-known band doing the Scottish circuit. There weren't many places to play in Scotland, simply because the church ran the licensing laws. Now figure this out. The church controlled the licensing laws. Therefore, you weren't allowed to play in pubs and have people, because in England, you know, you had a pub rock circuit back then, and you pay, you know, a quid or something to get in, or you'd put 10p or whatever it was, equivalent, on a pint of beer, and that would pay the band. And you weren't allowed to do that in Scotland, so we had to go out and be a kind of human jukebox. You had to learn, you know, top 10 records and play in town halls and at, you know, at kind of dances and things like that. So it was a really strange kind of upbringing. So Salvation had already done this circuit. It was two brothers who ran the band. It was their band, the McGinley brothers. And I was still working at my apprenticeship, and the keyboard player who was in the band that I was in at the time, Stumble, wanted to audition for this proper band, this real band where you didn't have to work during the day and just play music. And I went with them to this audition. And of course, when I went to the audition, it was only the two brothers. They were looking for a drummer, a guitarist, and a keyboard player. So they were basically building an entire new band. But they had this reputation. People knew who they were, and they could go out and command £100 a night, you know, for playing. And they asked me to step in, stand in and play guitar, because they'd seen me, I'd supported them a few times in my band. They asked me to play guitar while they auditioned a keyboard player, knowing that I wasn't interested in the job. And of course he didn't get the job, and they offered me the job as guitarist. So I went home, you know, and said to my parents, look, you know this is what I want to do, and I'll leave it up to you. You know, the decision lies with you. I've got another 2 years to do my apprenticeship, but the day that I finish my apprenticeship, I'll walk out and I'll do this. I will join a band and I'll play music. And much to my surprise, my mother came back and said, follow your heart. You've got to do what you think's right.
So this was real landmark stuff?
Huge landmark stuff. It was, you know, it was unheard of, you know, to get a job that my parents had wanted me to get, to land this job. 500 kids went for this apprenticeship, and 10 people were taken on, and I was one of those 10. And I had the job of walking in there and saying to the head of the apprentices, I'm leaving. I'm going to go and join a band. It didn't go down particularly well. And
at this time, that first bite of success is just around the corner with the next band that you're in. Have you got the sniff of it now? You're thinking, oh, I think this could be me.
I knew it was going to be me. I just didn't know where the success was going to come. It's like a great big invisible wall. You can carry on doing the same circuit for years and years and years and get better at what you're doing. And then you hit this big invisible wall and you can't get through it or under it or over it until something comes along and just makes the wall disappear.
There's not many times you can say you sit with someone who's knocked ABBA off the #1 spot. But Midge, I think that's you, and if it's all right with you, we'll find out about it in a short while. Of course, with the next band, Midge, that was where success lay. It was right round the corner. Via the wonderful Slick, and of course, Forever and Ever. Who can forget that for an ever?
Most people hope.
I mean, when people mention Slick, do you just go, oh, please?
No, it was all right. It was a real weird experience, I have to say. I mean, you know, Slick was basically salvation. The singer left. I was playing guitar. I took over vocals. You know, had my long hair chopped off. It was the time. You have to think that the drummer Kenny and I, we were kind of fashion gurus, and we went off one day and we saw Dirty Harry, and we thought, he's so cool. I want my hair like that. So we went into the hairdressers, had our long, really long hair chopped off into these kind of James Dean-esque quiffs, you know, Dirty Harry style. And I took over vocals, and we changed our name from Salvation to Slick. And we were rehearsing in a place in Glasgow where our manager, it was a ballroom that our manager owned at the time. And Bill Martin, of Bill Martin, Phil Coulter fame, had songwriters who wrote for the Rollers and Kenny and Arrows and a whole pile of people, Eurovision things. He was visiting our manager, and he heard us in the background. And he thought, we were doing... Sparks is This Town Ain't Big Enough for Both of Us. Me singing, "This town ain't big enough for the both of us." And he thought we were the record. And he came out and saw us and said, oh, that's it. And he offered us a dreadful record deal, but it was a great record deal because it was the only record deal we were ever going to be offered.
Never was a good one.
So that's why it was good. So we turned up in London to come and do this song that Phil Coulter had written for us, I think called Forever and Ever. And we got to the studio and we could hear it playing. And we were sitting outside the studio. We could hear this mumbly kind of thing. It sounded like a kind of bad Bay City Rollers B-side, you know. And I thought, oh God, what is that? It's dreadful, laughing all the way. You know, we had an 8-ton truck outside full of equipment that we'd brought down from Scotland, and then we were told that this was our backing track because that's how they did things. It didn't matter if you could play or not. The session guys had been in that morning, rattled off a backing track, and they just wanted us to sing it. You know, so we ended up singing this thing, and it became a #1 record. And as you rightly said, it knocked ABBA off the #1 slot.
Mamma Mia, yeah. That went, and there was Slick.
For a week.
For a week. Now, what do you, for a week? Oh, well, it's a big week. That's the first week and first #1 you had. So where's Midge Ure now? Where are you living? What are you doing? Are you travelling the country?
Well, with great anticipation from our very naive managers in Glasgow. I mean, we were all very naive. You know, we used to fly down from Glasgow to go and do press and promo in London, and then not bill the record company back. We'd end up paying for it. So when Slick finished, we owed a huge amount of money to a management company. So they, in their infinite wisdom, said, okay, right, you better start thinking about, you know, you should have a car. You can't go in the bus anymore, you're a pop star. We'd have a car, so we had a car, and and I bought a little house in the outskirts of Glasgow. And all of that went, again, within 6 months. You know, the records got worse. The whole new wave explosion came along, early '77, blew the teeny bop thing completely out the water, quite rightly. And everything had to go. So I didn't know what I was going to do next. I had no idea. I could quite easily have ended up driving a bus or driving a bakery van like my dad.
And of course, next you hooked up with a pistol.
I got a telephone call, which came about in a very odd way. Before Slick's dreadful demise, we did a couple of huge concerts. We did a big concert at the Glasgow Apollo, and then did a concert the next night in the New Vic in Victoria, or the Old Vic, Victoria. And there was a journalist there called Caroline Coon, who used to write for Melody Maker. And she'd taken a fancy to Jim, the bass player, for some reason. And she came and saw it and reviewed the concert. She'd done an interview with us and loved the whole idea. In fact, that's where the term, dare I say it, where the term punk came about. Caroline Coon did an article on Slick and said, well, tell me about this whole image thing you've got. And I said, well, it's punks, it's street punks. And the next article she wrote was about the Pistols, and she called it punk rock. So that's what it.
Wow.
And for any aging punks out there, I'm sorry, but it's true. You know, we coined the phrase.
You heard it here first.
We heard it here first. And she had bumped into Glenn Matlock and said he was looking for a singer, guitarist for his band, the Rich Kids. And she said, I've seen that guy front Slick. You should get him in. And without ever having seen me or talked to me, I got a phone call saying, how'd you fancy coming down to London for a weekend and, try out with the band, which is what I did.
So did you find yourself sort of getting swept away, all this new wave fashion?
No, it wasn't that at all. I mean, if you look at my career, it's so sporadic and mad. You couldn't plan it. You know, there was no kind of, mad decisions going, I'll just go and do that because I need to do that. That's how I get my foot back in the door. It just happened. I didn't instigate the thing happening. I went down to London. We rehearsed on the Friday afternoon 3 songs that Glenn and Steve knew, the other guitarist in the Rich Kids had written. And we went out that night round London. We went to the Islington Angel, where the Police were playing. Before they were the Police, I mean, they were the Police, but before they were famous. And the opening act hadn't turned up, the support band hadn't turned up, so we went up and played a 3 song. Then we went to somewhere else. We went to what was Camden Palace, where the Rats were playing. And we went up, we played 3 songs there as well. Then we ended up at a warehouse party where Susie and the Banshees are playing, Sid and Nancy's over in the corner. I'm talking to Mick Jones from The Clash, and it's great. We played 3 songs there as well. So it was kind of baptism by fire. I'd read about all these people in the music papers, and all of a sudden I was there in the middle of it. It was really exciting, it was fantastic. But I went back to Glasgow thinking I'll still try and do something with Slick because they were my friends. They'd been my friends for a long time. And 3 months after that, it became very obvious that it just wasn't going to happen. So I moved to London.
So amidst all this new romantic fashion, are you conscious of being part of it with Visage, with Mr. Strange and Mr. Egan?
Well, I bought, from the Rich Kids. Rusty was the drummer in the Rich Kids, and we'd started listening to a lot of music coming out of Germany, coming out of Europe, which was very electronic-based synthesizer music from Cannes and Neu and La Dusseldorf and Kraftwerk, of course. And Rusty had started DJing in his kind of spare time in the evenings. He started this club in a little place called Billy's in Soho. And on a Tuesday night, all these kids who used to be kind of part of the punk thing got very bored. It was the 2nd and 3rd generation punk bands come along. It was high street fashion. They didn't want to be part of that. They'd been part of this whole kind of Bromley contingent, these kids who started, dressing up as GIs from the 50s. They all looked like Elvis. They all had slick back hair and quiffs and really smart. They'd all been punks, but they'd got tired of that and moved on to something else. So Rusty was catering for this crowd, and he got a real buzz going at this little Tuesday night club where they played Roxy and David Bowie and the early Ultravox and a lot of this music coming out of Germany. So I bought a keyboard, I bought a synthesizer and brought it into the band. And it was the keyboard that broke the band up. I saw the Rich Kids maybe, introducing this electronic element into the rock that they did. You know, it's very guitar orientated, which, funnily enough, was exactly what Ultravox was when I ended up joining Ultravox. It was electronics and rock instrumentation. And Glenn Matlock, whose band it was with the Rich Kids, hated the synthesizer, hated it. So Rusty and I went off with this keyboard thing, came up with the idea of putting a band together round his mate Steve Strange, but using all our favourite musicians, Billy Currie from Ultravox, John McGee, Barry Adamson, and Dave Formula from Magazine, and just getting in the studio and just knocking up some electronic techno pop, I suppose you'd call it. I don't know. And that's what we did. We didn't expect it to be successful.
But you get in towards the time now, Midge, when the video, they often said that you thought of the video before you wrote the song. It was the age of the storyboard, I guess, beginning, I guess, with the Boomtown Rats and Mr. Geldof. But by this time, is the music taking sort of second place to image and the age of the video?
No, it could have easily. I mean, you know, when the whole thing, when Rusty's whole club moved on to the Blitz, hence the Blitz Kids and all of that stuff that was the tabloids were writing about at the time, the music was all important. Well, it was to me. The music came first. What happened was that any evening in the Blitz, you could stand around and, although you didn't know who these guys were, in 6 months or a year's time, they were Spandau Ballet. He was Boy George. You know, he's a major journalist. He's a film director. He designs hats. He designs clothes. She does this. She does that. You know, they all developed into something else. You know, all stemmed from there and grew into something else. So to me, the interesting part was not go out and make a video like the Boomtown Rats or like Queen, you know, Bohemian Rhapsody. We took it a step further. We said, no, we don't want to shoot it in video. We want to shoot it in 16mm film. We want to crop the screen top and bottom and make it look like CinemaScope. You know, we want long shadows cast across, you know, wet cobbles and flashlights in the lens and all of that stuff, all these images that we had in our heads. So we did that, and when people saw the one that they did see, we'd done 2 videos. They saw Vienna, and when artists saw that, they said, I want one. I want one of those, because it took that whole different level. You know, everyone wanted a mini movie, but the music was still in the forefront at that point. It changed later, where the fashion statement, the look, the image superseded what it was meant to be promoting, and that was the music.
But you're still feeling, again, no great shift inwardly. You're feeling you're riding another wave, but not being conscious of any sort of fashion change within you, because you're certainly looking different by now.
Oh yeah, no, the fashion thing was always very evident. You know, when I joined Ultravox, there was the little pencil moustache and you know, all of the dreadful stuff. But it was all part, you know, the Burberry raincoat. It was all part of the kind of mid-European 30s, 40s influence that Ultravox kind of had in the music. So the look kind of derived from that. The dead men suits, you know, the Oxfam clothes, you know, that's what we wore, that's what we bought, and that was how we walked about the streets. We looked like that. So yeah, that kind of thing just evolved. You know, it just happened naturally. It went hand in hand with the music, the whole image. But it gets to a point where it's ridiculous. The music doesn't carry it off anymore, and the image gets too silly, or the look gets too silly, and it becomes a pantomime. And
there's the age-old problem, I suppose, of then taking it out on the road and trying to relive that moment of that video. I mean, a lot of bands didn't succeed.
Well, we did. I mean, we used to tours used to cost us a fortune. We used to have these dreadful conversations with the management, and they'd say, "Look, this is what you want to take out this huge stage set." I was, yes. And you want to paint all the equipment on stage, including the stage, grey? Yes. Why? Well, because you'll see, and of course the shows were fantastic. They were spectacular shows. The lighting, the staging, the whole thing was great. But you come back after doing a 6-month tour to a bill for £150,000. That's what it cost you to go out and do it. And most artists would do the big stage show in London, trim it down for the rest of the UK, and then really trim it down for the rest of the world. Not Ultravox, no. We took the whole thing. We tried to put, you know, a gallon into a pint pot, you know, in some of the venues we'd play in Europe. They were tiny little places. We got this huge stage set where half of it's still in the truck. It was madness, but it was a great madness. It was lovely. So we managed to do it live. We managed to pull it all off live. We were a live band, much more so than a video band.
And Midge, at this point, can you believe what's really happening to you? I mean, big stadiums now, this is really, really big time stuff.
Yeah, well, when it all changed, because I didn't change, I was doing the same thing when Success came along. I remember standing in a rehearsal room in North London, which I'm sure you've been in. In fact, I know you've been in. And my manager turned up with 2 great big bottles of champagne. And we said, what are you doing here? The managers don't turn up at rehearsal rooms. They're horrible places. He said, you're in the charts. I said, what do you mean? He said, you've got 2 singles in the charts. You've got Visage and Ultravox in the top 40. And you've got 2 albums in the charts as well. So I hadn't changed. I hadn't done anything different. Something came along and it all shifted sideways somehow. So yeah, you believe you can do anything at that point.
Okay, success has come to Midge Ure. You've got singles, albums everywhere. It's hit. Explain in a couple of words. How did you feel?
Vindicated. That was only one word, I'm sorry.
But a great word, Midge. A fantastic word. If ever I've heard some words, that was definitely one of them.
Thank you.
So, okay, you're vindicated, you've done it all, Ultravox there, you've got the charts and all that stuff. Let's leap on a bit now to the magic, if you want, of Live Aid. It's all pretty much been said and documented very well, Midge. But how did you and Geldof actually meet?
I was doing a TV show called The Tube, rock show up in Newcastle, which Paula co-hosted with Jules Holland. And Bob was talking to Paula. I'd known him for years, so I was stuck on the phone. And Bob said, I've seen this thing on television, it's disgusting, I want to do something, will you help? And of course, by rights at the time, I was so busy, Bob was doing nothing, I was incredibly busy, and I should have just said no, but I didn't for some reason. I said yes, and we met up a couple of days later, and Bob already had the kind of bones, the structure of a song in his head, something that he had done for the Boomtown Rats, and they rejected, that's how good the song was. And we sat and met up on the Monday. The Tube was the Friday night. We met on the Monday. Decided the only thing we could do was write a song, and maybe if we got a few famous people on there, we could maybe raise £100,000 if we got a #1 record at Christmas. Because if you get a #1 at Christmas, you triple your record sales. You know, your auntie buys it and stuff. They don't care what it is. They buy the #1 record. So we figured we could maybe raise £100,000 if we could do that. I went off and wrote my little jingle bit, which Bob said sounded like Z cars. And Bob then came to my place and played this that way. He plays left-handed, upside down, backwards chords and things, and kept singing me this song that changed every time he sang it. It was dreadful. Ooh, Christmas time. And I'd spent 4 or 5 days in my studio. I had a studio at the bottom of my garden, which you've been in as well. And kind of glued these very bizarre ideas together and kind of laid out the backing track and played 90% of the instruments and things on it, which led to the day that everybody saw that, you know, the classic bit of documentation where all the artists all turn up looking very bedraggled, very hungover, you know, all wondering what the hell they're there to sing, because they'd never heard it. It's the weird thing, it struck me only in the last few years, that all those people turned up without having heard the song. They didn't know what the song was like. It could have been the worst thing in the world, and maybe in some people's minds it is, but, you know, they all turned up irrespective of that, you know, and most artists wouldn't. They'd want to hear the song, they want to know who else is doing it, to gauge whether they're the right guy to, you know, it's the right thing for them to do or not, and none of that was there. They all turned up because Bob and I had said, we're doing this, will you help? And they all helped, which is great, and that, of course, led on to Live Aid.
Within, you know, after Live Aid, post Live Aid, I think Geldof has gone in the press saying, well, nothing really happened after it. The problem is still there. But on a lighter vein, musically, after Live Aid, that's a big mountain you're on there. I guess the only way to go is down, but you came back and you had a solo hits and...
I'd already started, because I had my studio. I mean, I was advised by all and sundry not to buy or build a recording studio, because the classic event is artist buys recording studio, never learns how it works, finds new interesting studio in the Bahamas, you know, and goes to record there while his gathers, you know, cobwebs. And I didn't. I wanted the tools. You know, I knew a long time ago that eventually, you know, you're a statistic on a bit of paper in some accountant's office in your record company, and eventually they're going to look at it and go, this doesn't add up, dump it. and you're left alone. But if you've got your own studio, your own recording facilities, you can carry on making music. So I decided a long time ago that this was going to happen to me at some point. It's not genius, it's just the way it is. So I had already started recording. Ultravox had taken a 6-month sabbatical, and I did a kind of classic busman's holiday. You know, I went straight into the studio and started working on a solo record, which was interrupted by Band Aid and Live Aid. So when all of that was out the way, to all intents and purposes, I got back and finished my solo record and put it out, and If I Was a big hit for me. So I went out and I toured the world in 80 days.
80 days?
Yeah, I did a classic 80-day tour. I went to America and Canada and New Zealand and Australia and Japan and the UK and throughout Europe, all in 80 days. Because I had to get back to work with Ultravox. I had to get back because they were all waiting for me to, you know, this Band Aid thing and Live Aid thing had eaten into our 6-month sabbatical, so it was nearly 2 years by the time I got back to the band.
A man of many parts, most of which work. Aren't you finding yourself a bit stretched by now? I mean, how are you keeping life and soul together? Because you're around the world, you're working, you're coming off this big mountain of Live Aid. You've got Ultravox, your solo career. What's keeping your head together here?
I just loved it all. I mean, it was everything that, as a kid, you know, growing up in a slum in Glasgow, it was everything that I dreamed of. You know, just being allowed to go into the studio and do what I want to do as opposed to doing what someone else was going to tell me to do. You know, that was imperative to me. It was something that I felt very strongly about, you know, anyone starting to write songs. You know, my first songs are absolutely dreadful, really, really bad, derivative. You can tell who I was listening to by the song that I wrote. You know, one would sound like David Bowie, the next one would sound like, you know, Roxy Music, the next one sounded like Queen. You know, it was all over the place. So writing songs is like embarking on an apprenticeship. You have to write some real stonkingly bad ones before you write the stonkingly good ones. And sometimes you maybe feel as though you never quite got there. So all of that, I just loved the whole thing. That was my adrenaline, that was my fuel, the whole thing, the excitement, the buzz, the telephone ringing, you know, how do you fancy doing this? Yeah, great, it's fantastic, let's go and do it. And it's always been like that for me.
There's a quote from you somewhere that says that you find it hard to imagine people going to the loo and writing an album in that time. Do I take it from that it takes you rather a time to write a song?
I've written a few that went down the toilet.
But it obviously takes some time over your songs.
No, I'm not that kind of prolific writer. I think of people like, you know, Elvis Costello, who just seems to just pop out for 20 minutes and come back with a new album, or 2 new albums. He's always got 2 coming out at the same time these days. And that's just great, you know, I love people who can do that. I can't. I've got to sit there and fine-hone it and craft it and hack at it and throw things away. You know, you sit and write some lyrics at night and, you know, it sounds great, it sounds fantastic. And then you get up cold light of day and you play it and you sing it and you go, oh, God, it's dreadful. And you have to go back and redo it and until you've got this, it's like, writing a song to me is a bit like, you know, not just having a jigsaw puzzle and doing it. It's like having a picture, cutting it into pieces, and then having to put it all back together again. But you can do it in a multiple of different ways, so you get a different picture each time, you know. So it's a bit like that, and then instinctively you know that it's finished, you're happy with it, you don't want to change it anymore. So it's a long, slow process for me, but I love it.
And you do the classic thing of asking friends and family what they think of it and then ignoring everything they say.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. What do they know?
But at least you've asked.
Yeah, I've been polite.
So the songwriting is on the tombstone in many moons to come. Would you want to be Midge Ure, writer, performer? So writing's obviously right at your heart.
A Renaissance man. I like the fact that I've been in control, good and bad, of my entire life. I've made decisions that have cost me dearly. I've made decisions that have been incredibly good for me. But the bottom line is that I made the decision. I chose which path to take. Like 10, 15 years ago, I chose not to have DJs remix my music. And irrespective of how much pressure was on me at the time, you know, to have, this guy just rapping over them. No, it doesn't work for me. I just don't get it. I don't understand it. It's not what I do. So you have to stand up to be counted. You have to stand up and say, I'm aware that this is a tool that you need as an industry to have a hit record. Having a hit single generates a hit album, which generates lots of money for everybody. So I'm aware that if I throw that tool out the window or dismiss that tool, that it might not be a hit record, and I'm prepared to stand by that. And you have to do that at times, and I've done that. You know, I've chosen not to have remixes and rap and whatever. You know, DJs putting bass lines that just run right across, crashing over all the chords and things. And you have to kind of just do it. You know, if you want to be honest and real about what you're trying to do. You know, when it comes out of my studio, when it comes out of my hands, that's the way I want people to hear it. You know, unless it's somebody coming in and is going to do an orchestrated version of something that I can't do, great. You know, but I don't want to stick it out there and turn it into something else. I read this fantastic quote that it was a young band and they were talking about remixes. And he said, it's a bit like going out in the morning with your dog, taking it for a walk, and you come back and it's a cat. Because it's a completely different animal. When you send out your lovely song and it comes back and somebody's turned it inside out, it's just unrecognisable. So, you know, you kind of do that. But, you know, it's fine. I don't mind that, you know. I can survive in many, many different ways. So it'll be Midge Ure, Renaissance man. He chose to go this way.
And the rest of you can take a hike.
Absolutely.
So you've obviously seen around you people who haven't maintained control of their own destiny and fallen by the wayside, perhaps?
Yeah, and a lot of people, you know, I've been embroiled in a few messes myself in my life, but I've seen a lot of people get embroiled in things that go hand in hand with the music industry and not come out the other end. And that stuff's frightening, you know, and I've seen a lot of talented people, you know, just waste their talents. And I just think you have to have a lot of irons in the fire to survive, you know, a long time in this industry. You have to be very flexible. You have to be able to go out and, you know, perform, you know, I play acoustic shows mainly these days. And you have to be able to go out there with a handful of songs, stand in a spotlight without any, you know, dancing girls and, you know, explosions and pyrotechnics and whatever, and perform in front of 400 or 500 people and entertain them with just good songs and hopefully the ability to sing those songs. That is much more difficult than walking on at Live Aid. You know, that's harder to do. You know, you walk on at Live Aid, you've got 3 other guys with you, you know you're going to make a sound, you know it's going to be fine, you know the audience knows the songs, that's easy. Walking out in front of you know, an audience on your own, where if you break a string or you forget the words or whatever, they know everything. You know, it's like being under a microscope. So the flexibility thing is very important to me.
Ah, and of course, Midge, you've got a website, haven't you?
We have got a website. It's an extension of... subtly done.
You said to say that.
It's an extension of what I was saying about, you know, building a studio. You know, albeit, you know, 15 years ago that I decided to do that. If you're going to be a mechanic, you better have your own tools. Otherwise you can't fix a car unless you're working for a garage, you know. You got your own tools, you can go and fix a car on the street. You can set up your own business, you can do whatever. So I wanted my own tools. And the website thing is an extension on that. You know, the fact that people can just type in midgeure.com or just Midge Ure, and the first thing it comes to is my website. Where, you know, there's product there, there's information on dates, there's stuff that I put on there. You know, it's 20 years ago, people wrote you fan letters if you were lucky enough. 99% of the time, those fan letters never got to you. You never saw them. If they did get to you, you never read them because they were 9 months old, because they'd gone to the local record company in Latvia, you know, then went to, you know, America, and then went to London, and then eventually got to you. So, you know, it was always, I love you, you know, let's get married and stuff like that. But these days, you do a concert in Berlin, and by the time you've got home, somebody's reviewed the concert, written out the set list, taken photographs, digital photographs. It's all there on the web for everybody else all around the world to see, you know, and that's fantastic. That's an amazing thing. So I think maintaining that, there's a real closeness to your hardcore audience who are out there, who when they come to the website, they know that I got on there and I leave messages and I talk to people and I'd say what's going on in my life. And sometimes I go in the chat room, you know, and I'm sitting there chatting to people in Australia or, you know, Kansas. That's fantastic. It's a wonderful thing to do.
So, Midge Ure, is there life beyond the music business?
I've got 4 daughters. That takes up a lot of my time. But it's a nice thing to have. It's a lovely thing to have. everything I do, I think, is probably associated with music or derived from music. The only thing that I do that has got nothing to do with it at all is cook. And I enjoy it. It's a way of kind of switching my brain off, or putting my brain in a different mode. And I like my friends. I love my friends. I love having them around the house, and I love spending time with them. And the best way to do that is sit and have dinner. And I'll quite happily spend an entire Saturday cooking a Thai feast. I'll cook 7 or 8 dishes, you know, and just love. I mean, it's great because I liken it to like building an Airfix kit, except you can eat it at the end. You know, it's like you're sitting there putting all the bits together and getting glue all over your fingers. You know, but the difference is, you know, you have a lovely meal and a great time with your friends. So that's the only thing that I do that's not really related to music.
I just know that because that's the only way I turn off personally is that when I'm in the kitchen, everything else goes, and I sit with a bottle of wine, I can lose myself totally. And if the phone goes, I do not want to answer it.
No, that's my little space, and usually Sharon, my wife, will take the kids out and just leave me to it. So I get stuff everywhere, and it's all, and I know what it all is, and I know what it's all doing. And I'm very good, actually. I clean it all up as I'm going along. So, hey, you know.
Not many men do.
I am a domesticated animal.
Fantastic. Well, they say it's very sexy if you're funny and you can cook. That's just for your wife, not for me. So specialities are in cooking?
Oh, well, I love what I call peasant foods, which would be, you know, pastas, rices, anything with rice, anything with pasta. Anything with noodles, you know, the real cheap, basic, ordinary foods, because that's where all the good foods come from. You know, I love Italian food, you know, I love Thai, Japanese, Chinese, you know, all of that. I love Indian food. All the stuff that would have come from the streets and has now become really expensive in very exclusive restaurants. So, yeah, all of that. I love doing that.
OK, so you spent all Saturday cooking the ideal dish for 4 dinner guests. Who might they be?
Oh, I mean, in a fantasy world, I'd love to have John Lennon, because I've never met him. I met all 3 of the other Beatles, and I've worked with all 3 of them at Prince's Trust bashes and stuff like that, which is wonderful. But I never met John, because he was the one guy that should have been at Live Aid, you know, should have been there. It was really his baby. Who else would I want? I'd like... I met John Smith once, the Labour politician who was about to become the leader of the party before he died, and he was a lovely man. He was a fantastic character. I'm not great on politics at all, but I met him once in a restaurant, and he was fascinating. And he seemed to me, I think we all lost something the day he died, because we could have had a really good, you know, prime minister whose heart was in the right place. So I'd like to spend a bit of time with him. I'd love my old friend Phil Lynott to be back. I'd love to spend a bit of time with him again. Although he wasn't very good in kind of eating situations. He wasn't very... the social graces weren't really there.
He didn't look the type somehow.
No, he was too rock and roll for that. But, you know, it'd be nice to have him back. I'd like him to see his daughters, because I think he'd be very proud of them all. They're all gorgeous and stunning. And the weird thing is I've gotten to know them again since moving down here. They all live in the Bath area. And one more, Fred Astaire. I went to, yeah, of course, yeah. Well, I went to, when I was in Slick, and I was in London doing some press and promo, we were given an invite to a movie, and we thought it was a press premiere, you know, just like a little showing of this movie. It's a movie called That's Entertainment, and we turned up at Leicester Square in a taxi, and we kind of pushed our way through the crowds and got onto this red carpet. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? And of course, it's like we're #1 at the time, and there's cameras going off, and also I had no idea, completely green and naive. Went in, and I'm sitting in this huge big cinema in Leicester Square, and I look around, and it's Gene Kelly. There's Gene Kelly sitting there. And I'm sitting in a seat behind Fred Astaire. And I was so naive, I couldn't walk over and shake the man's hand. I just wanted to go up and say, you know, I really loved your work, it was fantastic, you know, a man with a men's style, you know. And I couldn't do it, and I blew it big time. You know, so this room is full of, like, the Hollywood greats. You know, Johnny Weissmuller, and it was just wonderful. The whole thing was brilliant. But I couldn't go up and say hello, I was so green and naive. So I'd love him to come to dinner and just have a chat. That'd be lovely.
And tap dance on the table right at the end.
Tap dance on the table, kick all the dirty plates off.
Fantastic.
Fantastic.
Now, Sound TV, we're full of new variety, championing the causes of the old-style comics and new-style comics. So, I mean, who makes you laugh? Who's made you laugh in the past, and who makes you laugh now?
Oh, the classics, you know, they're still classic. I mean, the things like, you know, Dad's Army I still love, you know, just brilliant comedy, even though it was the same punchlines every week. But that's what they did. It was the same, you know. It was like Steptoe Son. It was the you dirty old man. You know, it was all of that stuff. But I love that. You know, Morecambe and Wise, great. You know, I love the modern stuff. I loved all the young ones and, you know, all that kind of, you know, anarchic comedy that was the new wave of comedy as it was in the late 70s, early 80s. You know, right up to, you know, like Ricky Gervais and stuff. I'm one of the few guys who I was mentioned on the Parkinson show once, which to me was like the ultimate accolade, but by Ricky Gervais, because Parky asked Ricky Gervais, you know, who was his favourite person that he interviewed on his chat show, and it was me. So I think that's, you know, I think that says something.
Fame at last.
Fame at last.
You mentioned John Smith there. You don't seem very politically motivated, Midge. Why him? For some reason you don't feel like a political animal, or indeed you say you're not.
No, well, I mean, the whole Band-Aid thing was meant to be apolitical, or as apolitical as possible. By the very nature of what it was political, you know. So I never saw, back in my youth, I remember saying to the NME and the like, that, you know, politics and music shouldn't mix, because you'll end up with, you know, either weak music or weak politics. And of course it's not quite like that. You don't have to stand in a box and shout your songs down, you know, a megaphone at people to get your point across. You know, music's a fantastic vehicle for venting your angst, you know, getting something off your chest, you know, making a point, you know, having a go at somebody. And songs are great for that. You can hide things in songs that, you know, only you know about, and it's a way of kind of getting it all off your chest. You know, instead of sitting lying on a couch talking to a psychiatrist, you write a song, you know, and the song goes out there, and you think, okay, that's it. I've exorcised that ghost. So yeah, I'm not a political animal at all, but, you know, just the very nature of the fact that you know, I've been part of the Band-Aid Trust for 20 years. And will be for the rest of my life, and, you know, and hopefully that legacy will roll on. That in itself is a political statement. You know, the fact that you know, comic relief is directly sprung from the whole Band-Aid experience, because I was there. You know, the comedians wanted to do something, and that's now 20 years old as well. That's an ongoing annual thing, and that's fantastic. So, you know, the fact that it's left some kind of legacy is a great thing. So, you know, in that way it is kind of political.
And what's to do, Midge? What achievements have you got left then?
I've never planned anything, ever. You know, the telephone rings and hopefully somebody's asking you to do something interesting. These days, I suppose the telephone doesn't ring, it all comes through the internet. You know, is Midge up for doing blah, whatever it happens to be. So it's more of the same. I'm still passionate about music, still very interested in writing and recording. I'm still interested in performing live. And the day that I'm not, I'll stop doing it, I'll do something else. So yeah, there's loads of stuff to be done. You know, loads of collaborations, loads of you know, new projects. So I'll just see what the dawn brings.
And of course, you must always think back to that day when Mum and Dad said, "Go for it, son."
Follow your heart. I'm still doing it.
Midge, thanks a lot.
Pleasure.
We'll see you next time. Till then, bye bye for now.